Arun Jaitley, it seems, to have given his comments. We're picking it up from Cogensis right now. He says he doesn't want any responsibility in the new government for now. He's willing to work for the government and for the BJP, but only on an informal basis. He does not seem to be ready at this point of time, or willing at this point of time, to take up any official, any designated charge in the government or in the cabinet, it seems. This is something we're picking up from the agencies. Let's see. Hopefully we'll get some more clarity. Of course, we know that today is going to be that all-important meeting which Nayanthara had also addressed earlier on in the show, that today will be another big meeting with Amit Shah in attendance. They will be brainstorming about who is it that will be making it to the A team of NDA 2.0. Ruchi is joining us as well on the phone line. Ruchi, important commentary coming in, important statement coming in from Mr. Jaitley. He says he doesn't want any responsibility at this point of time in the government.
Absolutely. This is, this was being speculated for a very long time, and now officially a word has come in from Arun Jaitley's official Twitter handle, where he has said that he now needs reasonable time for himself to recoup his health, and which is why he will not be a part of the new cabinet. He will not be taking up any, official position as a part of the new government. This is a formal letter that he has written to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, really saying that his last couple of years, where he, when he was the finance minister, a lot has been done, but now he needs time, reasonable time for himself, for his treatment and for his health. Obviously, he will be available for advising the government informally on various issues. But so far, this was being talked about for a very long time, that perhaps Mr. Jaitley would not be in a position, given his health concerns, to take up a new role. And now, final confirmation coming up on this matter by Arun Jaitley himself. He has written a letter to Prime Minister Modi on the 29th of May, and now we're given to understand that he will not be taking up any such official position as well. Remember, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has been largely credited for big reforms in the country. He was something who really had the pulse on the economy, was speaking to a lot of stakeholders, largely credited for big reforms such as IBC, as well as the goods and services tax as well. However, it was his health that was deteriorating by the day. He had undergone several surgeries, last of which was, a surgery on his kidney ailments as well. And that was something that led to deterioration of his health, and he needed a little more time to kind of recoup and get his health back. And then, of course, be a part of the larger...
Ruchi, Maithili is also joining us, so let me get in her perspective as well. Maithili, Mr. Jaitley has tweeted his entire letter that he has written to the Prime Minister. He said that, firstly, he's thanked him for giving him so many responsibilities, so much critical tasks to undertake in the previous NDA government. But he says that because of serious health challenges, he is unwilling to take any formal charge in the government. So, there has been a lot of murmur about this, about Mr. Jaitley's health condition worsening, and he may not be able to be continuing as the finance minister of the country. Your thoughts?
Well, it really is a big loss to the country and specifically to the economy, because Mr. Jaitley was a very able finance minister. Under his guidance, in fact, he's kept a strict control on the fiscal deficit, and by and large, the NDA government during his entire tenure has been far more fiscally responsible than the UPA government. They also, as Ruchi mentioned, engineered two major reforms, both the IBC as well as GST. GST in particular, because it involves the state governments, regards quite a great deal of statesmanship, compromise, a willingness to meet the state governments. And remember, not all the state governments are BJP ruled. So it meant reaching out to opposition-ruled state governments and arriving at a consensus. And another thing that is noteworthy about the GST is that all decisions in the GST Council, and I repeat, every decision in the GST Council was taken by consensus. I doubt whether it would have been possible under any other finance minister. So I know I'm sounding as though I'm gushing over Mr. Jaitley, but I really do believe that he was one of the best finance ministers that you could possibly have hoped for. under the NDA one, Mr. Modi's first tenure. I do hope we will, whoever else Mr. Modi gives responsibility to, and it is a big responsibility because this is a time when the Indian economy is slowing down. And though we are doing relatively well, in fact, by the end of the month, we will get GDP numbers for the last quarter. And I do expect the Indian economy to grow at about 6.97% for the last fiscal. But it would require a very able, very wise, very statesman-like hand. So I do hope whoever comes in as the new finance minister will live up to the job and do, an encore on behalf of Mr. Jaitley.
Maithili, hi. Good afternoon. This is Ruchi. Mr. Jaitley has also written that he will continue to advise the government informally on various issues. But as far as the new finance minister, lots of names are being talked about, whether it could be Amit Shah, whether it could be Piyush Goyal. You were talking about the key challenges. What do you think would be the immediate low-hanging issues that the new finance minister would have to look at almost immediately?
Well, I think the first thing that is easily done is bank recapitalization, frankly. Because other things that we really need to do, like factor reform, labor reform, land acquisition reform or land acquisition, judicial reform, these are much more difficult and much more macro, involve many other players. Whereas in the case of bank recapitalization, which would be a big enabler for the government, because remember, slowing credit growth was one of the key factors why private investment did not take off. So that is something that is entirely within the finance ministry's domain. So this is something that he could do because monetary policy now post the new monetary policy framework is entirely with the MPC and the Reserve Bank of India. So there are not too many fiscal levers. As far as tax reform is concerned, that again will have to be something that is done in the budget. So one easy low-hanging fruit really is bank recapitalization because the recap bonds are essentially book entries and they only drain on the fiscal really in terms of the interest. And of course, the debt to GDP ratio does go up. So that is something I think that any new finance minister should look at and do it immediately and not in driblets. In fact, that is perhaps one area where Mr. Jaitley could be faulted for not having the courage to go in for recapitalization in a big way. That is something perhaps the new finance minister could do and could do easily, readily, and that might be able to kickstart investment in the Indian economy.
Right. Maithili, there's a behemoth task that lies ahead of whoever is appointed as the next finance minister under NDA 2.0, whether it's banking reforms, whether it's improving and pump priming the economy. Tell us, what is it that one needs to focus on? Of course, you spoke about the low-hanging fruits or the immediate issues that need to be addressed, but over the next 4 to 5 years, there are a lot of key challenges that lie ahead.
Yes, of course, there are key challenges because as I said, finance and home ministry, I think these are the two key ministries in any government. So apart from being bank recapitalization, things like, as I said, ease of doing business, so those things involve other ministries as well. So what he could perhaps do is taxation again is another area that isn't the finance ministry's domain. Of course, he has to take the larger, fiscal point of view as well as the prime minister's view. But the fact is that we have already seen GST reform. And there are a lot of tweaks that are still remain to be done in GST. There are many sectors that are not included in GST, real estate, alcohol, electricity, petroleum. So these are areas that need to be included in the GSTs in order to widen the tax base.
Maithili ma'am, just hold. Right. Maithili ma'am, just hold that thought. Joining us now on the phone line is Ashima Goyal. Ms. Goyal, many thanks for taking your time out and speaking to us at ET now. Mr. Jaitley has formally tweeted his letter that he sent to the Prime Minister on the 29th of May saying that he will not be taking up any new role in the new government. However, he will be, looking at informally advising the government on various issues. What do you think will be the big legacy for Mr. Jaitley as the finance minister? He's been largely credited for pushing reforms such as GST without the GST Council looking at, voting even one time, and as well as the big reforms on IBC as well.
Yes, under him, the finance ministry has made major structural reforms as well as other contributions. GST is one, and in particular, getting states to come together and achieve consensus on really difficult issues, and also very quick feedback, very quick response to feedback and adjustments according to feedback. All that was a major contribution. the bankruptcy code is really going to change lending behavior in India. That has come through. And I think another major contribution was sticking to a fiscal consolidation path despite slower growth and giving the signal very clearly that this government is committed to fiscal consolidation. Yeah?
This is Maithili. And I just one quick question to you that all these things that you mentioned are very important and very relevant. But I think one thing that we've almost taken for granted and we forget to give Mr. Jaitley credit for is for allowing the new monetary policy framework also to come into existence. Because the fact is that in the past, finance ministers were very vocal in their demand to the Reserve Bank of India to cut their the rate of interest. Whereas Mr. Jaitley, once we had the MPC in charge and once the government gave its mandate for the new monetary policy framework, he never once tried to, exercise any view or opinion or thrust his views down the RBI. He had a hands-off approach. So is that also something one should give him credit for? And one more question in hindsight. Do we really need to review the monetary policy framework to ensure that the RBI sees it as a flexible rather than as an inflexible target?
Yes, I think that there was over-enthusiasm in the beginning. So it's important to remember that what has been implemented is a flexible inflation targeting. And that means that especially when inflation is in the targeting band, growth can be given priority. I think it was also that this whole government was focused on structural reform, partly because they inherited a lot of macroeconomic vulnerabilities. There were twin deficits and high inflation. So they were focused on that. And now that this period is past and the framework is well established and inflation is down, it's especially important to recognize that what we have agreed to, what we are implementing, flexible inflation targeting, and therefore weight must also be given to growth. And since inflation target has to hold over a number of years, not over 2 years, there is scope for some deviation in the short run without really upsetting inflation expectations. Some research we've done at IGIDS suggests that household inflation expectations, there are signs that they are getting somewhat anchored, and that might be responsible for the fall we've seen in core inflation recently. So I think this whole structural reform, and now is the time for sort of pay off. Now these are in place, then policy can afford to look at the cycle to be more counter-cyclical. But Jaitley, I agree that he has been very...
we were talking... Ms. Goyal, I also want you to talk to us about how important will be the issue of bank recapitalization. We were speaking to Maithili, before we got you on the call, and she was saying that the new finance minister will have to look at the issue of bank recapitalization on a war footing. What are your views on that?
Yes, I think that this whole issue dragged on, the NPA issue and bank, because we were waiting for a team, this bankruptcy code. We needed something like that because for the first time a lot of money had gone to private industrialists, and they were asked the taxpayer to bail out all these people. They had to their assets. They had to take part in the in the resolution. So now that is in place, and there has been some sort of mergers and improvements in board composition, etc., in public sector banks. So some improvements in governance. But it is really time to complete the bank recap because we are seeing the slowdown in credit growth, in growth, in consumption, in investment. And so credit is not reaching, banks are not lending as much as they should be. And NBFCs also, they're not bailing out NBFCs, even though the Reserve Bank has given permission, made it easier for them to do so. So once there is full recapitalization, then they will be more confident to start lending again.
Well, I wouldn't want to take away any of the credit from Mr. Jaitley, but I think he really deserves all the praise that we have been lavishing on him. But in hindsight, would you also agree that Mr. Jaitley was extraordinarily lucky as a finance minister? Because throughout most of the period when he was FM, oil prices were very soft. and the next FM just might not have that luck. In which case, I think, he might quite envy Mr. Arun Jaitley, the fact that, he was able to manage the Indian economy, steer the Indian economy in relatively easier times. Oil prices were low. We didn't have the kind of global trade winds that we're seeing, no signs of a trade war. So would all these things also, we have to take some consideration for those fact that Lady Luck smiled on Jaitley, please?
Yes, I agree that the oil price softening, but I think again we have to give him credit that he did not pass on all the cut, despite a lot of pressure to do so. So he helped resolve. It helped contribute to the fiscal consolidation that we saw. But also, people got used to the fact that oil price cuts are not necessarily going to be passed on, because from the longer term point of view, a key sort of weakness for India really is our dependence on oil imports. And we need to reduce, we need to reduce our dependence on oil, and so the initiatives towards renewable energy, etc., which are all long run, are also very welcome. But then you need to discourage consumption. So to that extent, keep oil prices relatively high in the Indian economy. And despite that, inflation came down. I think that again we are seeing the inflation targeting regime, because commodity price shocks are not passed on into inflation if household expectations are well anchored. So the next finance minister, even if he's not so lucky with respect to oil prices, will benefit from better anchored household inflation expectations, perhaps.
Ashima, one thing that we saw in the last government was that, as elections approached, there was this distinct shift to the left, whether you're talking about the income support scheme or in terms of the MSP hikes. So do you think that was just an election promise? Will that continue under the new FM? In which case, will the new FM be a little bit more willing to ease the fiscal deficit target instead of 3.4, maybe inch it up to 3.8, 3.7, because the economy needs some kind of stimulus and monetary policy is not your domain, then how else can it be but fiscal stimulus? Is there a chance of that, given the tilt to the left under the last government towards the end?
I think that the popular schemes were coming more from the Congress, the Nyaya scheme, etc., while the payment to farmers was very targeted. And I think a lot of this government schemes such as Swachh Bharat, etc., are nearing completion. So there'll be money available to reallocate, and they have demonstrated that they're committed to fiscal consolidation. So I don't think with this government we're going to see a very large rise in fiscal deficit or spending. But one very peculiar thing that happened this year, normally in an election cycle, you see a lot of money coming into the economy as parties spend. But this time it was very tight, and people in the market everywhere saying there's no money, no liquidity, etc. So I think perhaps it was that the government stopped spending to meet the fiscal deficit targets, or that seems to have outweighed the election spend factor. We saw cash leakages rise. M3 growth is very low. Money is not coming into banks. They were not creating, they were not lending, and therefore deposits were not growing. So as all this reverses, and I think there are a large amount of unspent cash balances also in the government, as they start spending, and you have plans to spend over a year. Another thing I think Jaitley needs to be credited for, he did quite successfully, was to front load government spending. Otherwise, it always used to be left for the last, and then it would not be spent, etc. So if they front load spending, because it's the same government coming in, they hit the road running, as they say, I think they'll be able to give enough of a stimulus without necessarily increasing fiscal deficit targets.
Ms. Goyal, Mr. Jaitley was also the chief troubleshooter for Mr. Modi, if I should put it like that. I mean, he was really defending the government on various issues, not just economic issues, but various political issues as well. In his absence, how do you think, the roles will be defined in the new cabinet? I know you're not looking at this issue particularly, but somebody who's looked at policy making for a very long time, who's looked at how government formations take place. How do you think this will happen in the in the next few days in the new cabinet?
He has said, I believe he will continue to advise the government, and I'm sure he'll continue to be an aggressive user of Twitter and defend government actions and be an insider in policy decisions. So his role in articulating the government's point of view and defending its actions will continue, I am sure.
Ashima, if you were to advise the next finance minister, I know you've been watching very carefully from the sidelines and you were in the technical advisory committee with the Reserve Bank of India. Would you tell the next finance minister, purely unofficially, that maybe you could just put in a word to the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India that he also needs to have monetary policy ease a little bit? Of course, you cannot tell the governor directly or officially, but is there a case for sitting together with the governor and saying that, yes, you have been easing, but maybe you need to do more?
Well, I think this governor is very open to advice. He's consulting with a lot of groups, and a lot of people are saying we're seeing the growth slow down. So, if the ultimate aim of inflation targeting is to allow counter-cyclical macroeconomic monetary policy, and that is the dharma of monetary policy ultimately, right? So, if we have got inflation within the target band, I'm sure they will be more flexible in implementing inflation targeting and take care of and respond to the growth slowdown. And even though you have an MPC and the ultimate decision will depend on the voting, etc., but there's a lot the RBI can do in terms of pass-through just by easing up on the liquidity front, where they have full control, increasing the share of durable liquidity, which will bring down market rates also. Do something for the NBFC, which will increase borrowing. Yeah.
One promise that Mr. Jaitley did not deliver fully was in cutting corporate tax to 25%. And that's what corporates have really been looking forward to. Do you think that in the early days, that's the time when the government can, take risks? Do you see the next finance minister deliver on that promise? Because ultimately, it was a Modi government promise. So can we hope that in the next budget, we'll see corporate tax rate come down to 25% and maybe something on the direct tax code as well, Ashima?
Yeah, but I think that promise always had the rider that you'll remove exemptions, etc. And I think they have done this for the smaller corporates. So, but given that there is a slowdown and you need to reverse it, I think first they will act on simplifying GST, which is a big demand, which can also help business exporters especially.
Hi Ashima, this is Mubina as well joining into the conversation. I request you to hold on. We have a very important guest joining in right here on the show, Mr. H.R. Khan. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for sparing time out for this short conversation. Let's understand what are the challenges before India. What's going to be the roadmap that the government should follow over the course of the next 5 years? Because we do know that currently, while inflation may not be as much a challenge, growth is currently a challenge. So what is it then that the new finance ministry should look out for over the next 5 years?
Certainly there are multiple challenges awaiting the economy, and one of course is the banking sector issues have to be resolved. I think that things are happening. I think it should happen at much faster pace, and the reforms in public sector banks need to be fast-tracked. So that is one area. Second is, of course, associated with that is consolidation, corporate governance, whole host of issues relating to banking sector. That is one. Number two is major issue is this agrarian distress. So we have to address agriculture sector. How do we create a proper marketing buffer and risk mitigation in agriculture? So I think that is the one major challenge one has to. So inflation is down, but along with that, the prices have been depressed. So that will cause a lot of agrarian distress. So that is second. Third is continuing the flow to the small and medium sector. Fourth is bringing back the animal spirit of the corporate sector. People may admit or may not admit, but there is a lot of apprehension. So I think some trust bridge has to be established with the corporate sector, and I think you have to provide whatever incentives needed in a very transparent manner to bring back that animal spirit, because we have in a cusp of situation where there is a big war going on between China and US, and you have some opportunities to draw the flows and become some sort of a manufacturing hub. We have missed quite a few opportunities in the past, but this opportunity we should not let it go. Other issue is, of course, which comes to my mind quickly, is stagnation in export side. So I think we have to do all that we need to do. And one area where we can do tremendously well, which we are not focusing so much, is agriculture exports. In fact, we can with a granary for the world, given our agriculture diversity and surplus, which is mounting, and we are not able to absorb that, say, prices are down. So we can achieve both addressing the agrarian distress and increasing our exports. I think these are some of the quick thoughts I have in terms of and the other is, of course, absolute coordination between governments and the RBI on this variety of issues. I think that's necessary. And coming back to the banking sector issues, I think for whatever the glitches in IVC, which has now come, I think that needs to be smoothened as fast as possible.
This is Maithili, and I was listening to your list of, tasks for the new finance minister, and I'm afraid you've given him a very, very ambitious wish list, not just in the finance minister's domain, but within the domain of the larger government. So would you agree that one thing that he could do quickly, and perhaps is entirely within the finance ministry's domain, is recap of public sector banks? Along with that, some change in the corporate governance structure. Can we hope to see anything of the PJ Naik committee actually being implemented? Because unless you do that along with recap, you're never going to see an improvement in the style of functioning of Punjab public sector banks. So today you'll recap, then if you don't make any governance reforms, 2 years down the line you'll be doing exactly
That's why I
the same
said
thing.
you have to recapitalize, reform. And because to my mind, public sector banks, some sense people are getting there bleeding to slow death, and they have lost all will to fight out. Their share has now come down less than 2/3 from more than 70%. I believe 61, 62%. And they have a big franchise, they have big network. If it is not leveraged, I think it will be very bad for the economy. And private sector banks may not go to those areas. Of course, we have now a host of small finance banks. They can also play a role, but they will take time to scale up. So I think, as you rightly said, recap, reform, and resuscitating the public sector banks is very, very critical. I think the whole PJ Naik committee recommendations have to be taken on a very priority basis. I think we need some amount of much more professionalization of banking bureau. We need banking experts in the banking bureau to steer this. And I think both RBI, Ministry, and BDB have to work together. And maybe you can have, there is a need for a time-bound Narsimham Committee 3,
All right.
which can lay down a roadmap for implementation in the next couple of months.
All right, we need professionalization of the Bank Board Bureau. That's a word coming in from Mr. Khan. But let me also take it across to R. Gopalan, who's also joining us on the phone line. Mr. Gopalan, thanks for talking to us at ET now. Mr. Jaitley has said that he will not be taking up a new role in the government. At this point of time, what do you think will be the key challenge in front of the new finance minister? Mr. Jaitley is largely credited for getting in big reforms like GST, IBC. He was a chief troubleshooter for the Modi government as well. For the new finance minister at a time like this, when we are witnessing growth slowdown, what has to be looked at almost immediately over the next 100 days to give the much needed push to the economy?
Well, I would say that, finance is a very important area, and we should not look at 100 days, but there are some immediate issues which require to be tackled. There are liquidity issues which are there, NBFC issues which are there, which need to be tackled. Then, as a new finance minister, there is issues relating to budget numbers, how the budget is going to be presented, and the revenues which are going to be looked at, and the new expenditure schemes which have been announced in the manifesto by the BJP, implementation of that. Then the question of how to settle the GST in such a way that we are able to get more revenue out of it. There is a tax, income tax thing. There is a lot of expectation about corporate tax reduction for, kickstarting the economy, activities of the economy. There is a rural stress, which fortunately we are trying to reach the bottom, and we'll be in a position to come out, but that's an area which needs attention. Obviously, the NPAs and capitalization of the banks. These are some of the very important issues which, on top of it, the finance minister has to keep an eye on the external sector, where he has got, he could face a lot of issues relating to oil prices and China, US, trade frictions, Brexit, and a whole host of other issues which are in the horizon, and they are likely to impact this thing, which means that the funds which are going to flow into the country may also have an issue. Though we think this year it is going to be, this financial year, we're going to get a good amount of FPI and the FIA money, but one needs to look at how tightness in the international financial system is going to affect us as we go along. So there are a whole lot of issues the finance minister has to face, and I think I don't envy him. That's the most challenging job, I would say, one would get into.
Okay. We also are joined by Mr. Bakshi now from Bank of Baroda, former ED of Bank of Baroda. Mr. Bakshi, thank you for joining in. Yes, we are going to be staring in at a finance ministry which will not have Arun Jaitley at the helm of affairs for the next 5 years. Based on your relationship with him, based on how you've worked with him, etc., how do you think things will change? How are you reading into this initial news? And also, if you could talk to us about what is it then that the new finance minister will have to pay attention to over the next 5 years?
I think the government is a continuous body, and the agenda to be pursued by the government is also continuous, as set by the Prime Minister. And therefore, there will be a sense of continuity. And there are a number of pressing things which are already evident to everybody. And it's, of course, the finance minister's capability, his understanding of the markets, his understanding of the law, and his being able to do the balancing act. That's a very personal trait which everybody brings to bear on the issue. So Mr. Jaitley acquitted himself very well in the last 5 years, trying to bring all the factions together, trying to tackle all the difficult issues. But the issues have been... to his good luck, there were certain things which happened. To his challenges, there were certain things which happened. But he has done a very good job. Whosoever is the next person, and we can't speculate on a name, though certain names appear to be more plausible. But then they have got an agenda cut out for them. It is definitely going to be a very challenging job. They have got certain things, and it's economy is one thing, finance is one thing, which will go on presenting challenges every day. There are certain immediate issues which need to be tackled. The NBFC crisis is staring in the face, which needs to be tackled, along with RBI, recapitalization of the public sector bank, which have been more or less missing in their lending for some time. Although this year the lending percentages have been good.
Okay.
But still, they need to be recapitalized. In that, Jalan Committee's recommendations can be helpful to the government if they are positive. The NPA issues is staring everybody in the face.
Right,
the IBC slowdown and the IBC amendments on how to make it functional. Those are on the banking side of it.
Okay.
And of course, as Maithili said, governance.
Mr. Bakshi, you know what? And I'm sorry, but I'll have to cut you out right there. But yeah, valid points. NPA crisis. You mentioned even the entire capitalization bit, where we are waiting for the RK Jalan committee. For the Jalan committee to sort of come out with their note. But yeah, those are some valid points as well that you've raised on what the finance ministry has to do. But yeah, the government is a continuous cycle, and it'll go on. Life will go on. But on that note, Ruchi, Mr. Gopalan, Maithili, as well as Mr. Bakshi, as well as Ashima, thank you for joining in right here to decode the big news. Arun Jaitley is not going to be a part of the cabinet of the new government. On that note, we'll just take a very short break right here on the show.